Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Huntsman,
And this is Quince. What's good?
and we are coming to you live from American Top Team here in Watertown.
Absolutely. And today I want to start off actually by asking you a question.
Oh boy, I wasn't ready for that.
So how long have we known each other?
Shit, 5 years?
Years.
5, 6 years, yeah.
Sure. And since we met, I've been an artist, a musician, a rapper. I know you've heard songs of mine. We've been in the same band.
Sure, yeah.
Performed, in front of very large crowds before.
Yep.
What if I told you that all of my music, I didn't write any of it?
I would be
I didn't write the verses. I didn't write the hooks. I just like to be on stage. Now,
Okay.
how would you?
Okay.
How do you think going back and listening to that music, or even considering our relationship, just finding out now, how does that make you feel?
I would feel like you were a liar. There would be a long conversation off camera that I think we would have to have.
Absolutely. It certainly would be, it would be jarring. I mean, and that's why this week we want to talk about the importance of authenticity. Because this is very important in our everyday lives. And whether it comes to business or art or politics or martial arts or even in our social life and at home, the importance of authenticity is very prevalent.
Yeah.
Now, simply stated, the definition of authenticity is to be genuine. This is genuineness. And if I haven't been being genuine with you this whole time we've known each other, that kind of breaks that connection, doesn't it?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even kind of exploring it, hypothetically, obviously, a quick disclaimer, you do write all your own music.
Of course.
So, on that front, I've played in cover bands for 10 years.
Right.
And we've done some of our, our own originals and stuff. But for the most part, especially around here, you go out to a bar, you're going to see a band playing cover songs.
Sure.
Now, if you go into it with that knowledge that we're doing somebody else's work, that's cool. And
Right.
it changes the energy, and I mean, it's still a lot of fun to do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think if you would kind of hid that from everybody, I think a lot of people would be disenchanted with a lot of what you've done artistically and for the community, and a lot of your growth would seem very fabricated, very very disingenuous.
Exactly.
And authentic, right?
Right. Because that trust is now broken.
Yeah.
Because I think, authenticity helps to create consistency, which in turn helps to create trust.
Sure.
And I think those are the things that ultimately connect us, or at least certainly form that foundation or base in which we can grow from.
Right.
There have been artists over the years that I was a fan of, and that I find that they didn't write all their own lyrics.
Right.
And I'm like, damn, like what the, sometimes this shit blows my mind. Sometimes it's expected, kind of the difference between entertainer and artist. And sometimes entertainers, they don't care. They'll be like, no, I don't write all my own shit.
Right.
But I'm good at what I do. I've got a great voice, great charisma, this and that, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, for those that go under the guise that they put in all this work and they're telling you their life story, and this is what people connect with, and I think that's what it is. For you to think that I am speaking my truth, this is how we connect, this is how we learn from one another.
Yeah.
And to learn that that's all a lie, where does that leave us?
Right. Yeah, and so I guess it's all, so a little bit of it is expectation, which we've talked about before. Now, when I meet you and I hear your music or I see you perform and I say, man, this is awesome, you say, oh, thanks, man. And that's the extent of the conversation. And then I make the assumption that you're writing all your own music and this is all authentically you. A little bit of that's on me.
Sure.
So what, at a certain point, is it up to you to say, hey guy, every single song, I didn't write this song, but I'm going to perform it. Maybe
Right.
I've never heard that song before, and I don't know that it's not yours, but it's also not always fair of me to expect certain things from people, So when I see, when you watch a popular artist, and they're just on stage performing and they're doing sold out arena shows and all this, if I assume that they're writing all their own music, if I assume they want to be a storyteller and a songwriter and all this, and it turns out that all they really wanted was to get on stage and perform, you know, if their heart's into the performance and it's not, you know, that's their artistic outlet and it's not the writing, it's not the creative process behind that.
Right.
That assumption was on me, you know, so it's, I think, up to us to a certain extent to endeavor to find the authenticity, endeavor to find the truth in the matter, or at least ask the questions, right?
No, very true, very true. And sometimes it's more evident, it's more obvious. Like with art and music, for me, it's harder to come across sometimes because you don't know unless you ask the questions.
Right.
But say in a in what you do in the martial arts and fitness and things like that, if someone is coming in and they're telling you, I fight with this style, I've been training for this long, I work this hard every day, if they mean it or not, you can let that go because once they step in the ring, you're going to find out, and they're going to find out pretty quick.
Absolutely.
So, you know, whether at first you come to a show and you don't know if I'm doing my own stuff and you don't ask, and that might work, and you might be entertained and I might get paid and do whatever I do and move on, but how long will that keep up?
Right.
You know, it might happen 1 or 2 times, but eventually it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah. What's beautiful about that, so in martial arts, we have a saying, the mats don't lie. You know, exactly like you're saying. You get on the mat, you get in the cage, everything's going to be exposed. Whether you're working as hard as you say you are or not, it's going to happen. You know, when I have students that I haven't seen in a while, and they come in, and I ask them if they've been working, they don't lie to me. My students never lie to me. They say, nah, coach, I've been slacking, you know, because they know that as soon as they step on the mats and I watch them shadow box for 5 minutes, I'm going to know if they've been working or not. I'm going to know right away. And they know damn well I'm going to say something to them about it, you know. If you haven't been working, you haven't been working, it's fine, you know. But it's that pressure test. So kind of a hypothetical scenario, say you weren't writing your own music, and a lot of times what happens is when we, from having been in a cover band, when you learn a song, a lot of times you learn it pretty much close to the recorded version. When you play it out, that's how you play it. Now, a good musician, somebody who's practicing their craft, if something breaks down, if one of the band members forgets a part and they have to improvise and they have to fill in and we have to bring it back around as a group, a good musician, even though you're playing cover music, if you're practicing, if you're putting in the work outside, you're going to be able to recover that.
Right.
Now, somebody who's just going out and essentially playing the same thing, almost like you're playing to a track every single time, something goes wrong, you're going to be broken.
Sure.
You know, I don't know what to do from here. You're going to have to stop. You're going to have a harder set. It's going to be embarrassing. And then you're going to know, okay, that's not originally your own. That's not genuinely your own. You know what I mean?
Right.
You freestyle. How much time do you spend freestyling? You can freestyle over every single one of the songs you've ever made and make something different up. But it's, you know, and still stay close to the meaning of the song because you feel it, because you've written it.
Right.
You know, you live it.
Yeah. When that veil gets dropped, when your cover's blown, who are you then?
Yeah. When the pressure's on, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, truth be told, there is a good reason that people kind of wear these masks, you know, or have these certain beliefs or take part of these actions. And I think, as we were talking about before, this has to do with attachment. You know, people like to attach themselves to things, to ideas, to groups, and to situations. And I think that's a trait that we learned since younger, you know, since a younger age. We dress a certain way, speak a certain way to get the job that we want. We act a certain way, and you know, to maybe get the significant other that we want, or maybe we musicians might rap about certain topics or subjects because it's popular and it gets attention, it gets radio play, and it gets you paid. You know, so it's obvious why people might not be their authentic selves because sometimes, or maybe the idea is that your authentic self won't get you paid or laid or get your numbers up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it absolutely creates a sense of vulnerability when you're honest, when you're authentic, right? you know, when it, you know, like you said, a lot of times it's in the person's artistic expression. You're expressing, you know, your truest version of yourself. But, you know, we do it through music and stuff. We do it through training. We do it through poetry. We do it through writing. We do it through painting and sculpting. You know, all kinds of artistic expressions. Because to a certain extent, when we put a medium in between us and the truth, right, it helps keep that vulnerability away. Now, when you walk up to somebody, what's a reaction a lot of times that we get when you ask somebody a very personal question? I think it's anger. I think people get, you know, don't ask me that, or I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
Or if you walk up to somebody, if you went up to an artist, especially an artist that didn't write their own stuff or was still concerned about being vulnerable, and you say, hey man, do you write all your own stuff? How dare you? Like, who are you to ask me that?
Right.
Okay, right? Yeah, so it's anger is a very common response to vulnerability.
Right.
Yeah? But this authenticity, right, and the inability to be authentic creates a lot of cognitive dissonance, right? Between the way you want things to be and the way that things are. And a lot of it, again, stems from that vulnerability. The reason we attach ourselves to ideas, to ideology, to tribes, to, you know, and you see this in this cult mindset, or the people that identify as Democrats, or identify as Republicans, or identify as Libertarians and stuff. And you see a lot of times we can just say, well, I think this because this is the group that I belong to, right? And it's the same thing as that artistic expression. It puts a medium in between, right? I am this way because of this other thing, or this is how I'm expressing myself, not this is how I feel. Because explaining to someone exactly why you feel the way you do is a very vulnerable act. It's very unpracticed, it's very unpolished, you know? And then you run into the idea of confrontation. When you start questioning why somebody's doing something, if they get upset with you, there's usually some kind of unpure motive behind it, or inauthenticity to it. You know, one of the most amazing things that I've seen, and something I try to replicate in my coaching, is all the instructors that I follow are all very open about encouraging their students to question them. And I tell my students all the time, if you don't understand what I'm saying, or if you don't believe in the merit of what I'm telling you, or if you think there's a problem with advice or information or technique, or maybe you say something to me, please question me. And then we can have an open and honest conversation about it, and I'll explain exactly why, because I have reasons for every single thing I do. And I think any good coach is going to be that same way, whether it's kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, if it's strength training, if it's track coach, you know, whatever. Everybody's going to have a good reason for what they do if authentically that's their own.
Right.
You know, as an artist, why did you, like, we could sit down, and you actually were doing this for a while over lockdown. Was really cool, because you were taking your songs and you were breaking them down line by line.
Yeah.
And you were kind of explaining the why behind everything. And that's a very authentic and that's a very real thing, but it's also very vulnerable, because now we're deconstructing that medium and we're explaining, you know, this is just in a very raw way who I am, and how I'm expressing myself and why I'm making these choices. You know, and shit can be scary, man.
Definitely scary, but it was something that I felt it was new to me, and I thought maybe it would be new to the viewers, because often they'd only see me out at shows performing, and you get caught up in, I get caught up, the crowd gets caught up in the moment, and the music seems to just happen before you know it's over. But it was a good opportunity for me to say, you know, to sit back and say, hey, yeah, I've got these songs, I've got these words, but there is a life and stories behind these words that are my own. You know, it's not just these words that rhyme together or that sound cool or whatever. Like these are experiences. These are things I've learned. These are people I've lost. You know, and so it goes, life. And that's certainly one of the beauties of being authentic. Not that it is easy. Not that it is always easy. Now, you touched on a whole bunch of good points when you were on a roll there, and I didn't want to stop it, so now I've just got a whole bunch of...
Just a freight train coming down.
But, you know, you made one of your really good points that you made had to do with people's reaction. You know, that reaction of anger is usually what seems to be a defense. It's a defense mechanism, because whatever you are referencing to or shining light on makes them feel a certain way. And you mentioned the term cognitive dissonance, which I really like, and it's kind of like being two people in one body. You know what I mean? Thinking one thing, feeling another thing, and how that kind of splits the mind. And I think oftentimes in our need for approval, which I think why we attach ourselves so quickly to people, groups, ideas, concepts, beliefs, we have this great need for approval. So we think, hey, that's what we should be doing, even though we might feel a certain way or a different way. And I think that causes us a lot of internal turmoil and guilt. And I think those negative reactions are a defense to keep people away from that guilt, or more importantly, to keep you away from that guilt.
Right.
You know, which I think, and that'll probably come in, you know, many different forms. You know, I don't know if it's always guilt or what it is, but it's that cognitive dissonance that doesn't allow people to, doesn't allow themselves to hear others or to communicate themselves 100% to other people.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, sometimes the reaction comes from if somebody's questioning a part of what our perceived personality is, and something that we feel needs to remain intact. So a facade that we feel needs to remain intact in order for us to progress, whether it's through business, society, relationships, whatever, right? A lot of times we know where our weaknesses are. We know where the weaknesses are, and if somebody pushes on that, we know it's going to break. And we know if that crumbles, then we're going to have a lot of shit we have to go back and redo, right? So the easiest way to keep somebody from putting pressure on a weak area is to attack them aggressively, is to go after them. So we're defending our village. You know what I mean? Like this is our weak. This is where we're vulnerable. So we need to put our defenses here. We need to be aggressive. We need to keep people away from it. Right? And so it's a lack of authenticity. It's a lack of developing that weak area. And what's interesting about that is now it's a lack of our willingness to confront ourselves, right? A lack of our willingness to, so we know we can feel where we're weak. We don't have that willingness to confront where our weakness is and make it stronger, right? So we're not only are we being inauthentic with other people, but very much more importantly, we're being inauthentic with ourselves. We're lying to ourselves. And then it manifests in so many different negative reactions, right? Negative coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, what have you.
Sure. We're talking mental illnesses. We're talking addiction. We're talking even just getting sick, illness in general. With all that negative energy, negative thought flowing through us, because ultimately it does come down to that internal conflict that we share. Me coming up and asking you any of those questions has, and your reaction to them has little to do with me and the questions I'm asking, more to do with your interpretation of yourself within this world that you built around you. You know, and it does. You know, you're right. It you know, the coping mechanisms that follow after that, because we can't be honest with ourselves. I mean, it's brutal and it's a downhill slide. And it's a cycle that is hard to get out the longer that you are in. So, you know, a lot of times you know, sometimes people aren't into, you know, they're into the late 20s or 30s or even 40s, and people talk about a midlife crisis or crisis. And I think that's often what it stems from, is that cognitive dissonance, or thinking you're supposed to be or do one thing or be one way, and having that feeling that, man, but I really wish I was doing this. I really wish I had been doing this, or surrounding myself with this. And to the point where you mentally and physically and emotionally just can't carry it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about the metaphor of a tea kettle, right? And so, you know, our personality and our desires and stuff, they're the water in the kettle, right? And our body and then our actions are the kettle itself, right? And so the heat is the passage of time, and it's the desire inside of us for everything to come out. And if we let it go and let it go and let it go, eventually, and again, the midlife crisis thing, I think what happens is, as much as it seems like a silly movie cliche, I think this does happen to a certain extent. A lot of times, people wake up one morning and the kettle is boiling over. They wake up one morning and there's just screaming in their head that, fuck, I've been doing this wrong, like I'm not being my truest self. And you realize your entire house is made out of paper walls, you know, and then what's really catastrophic is you go and you deconstruct all this and you get to the foundation, you realize there was never anything there in the first place. And you think, you know, I've wasted the last 25 years of my life doing this and this and this, and you know, people feel completely lost, and to a certain extent, I've had experiences like this before. When I was working at the freaking cheese plant, I just, every freaking single day I'd go in, I'd sit there at 10:30 at night, I'd be sitting in the parking lot getting ready to go into work. Right. I could feel that kettle boiling. And then one day I got off work at 7:30 in the morning, I went into HR and I put in my 2 weeks notice. I was like, that's it, I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And then from there, I actually got super depressed after eventually ended up getting fired, which is kind of a funny story. But from there, so I lost that kind of a sense of identity where I'd always had a job,
right.
And then I was trying to focus all my efforts on becoming a full-time martial arts coach. And it was a lot of reassessment of, is my foundation here? Is this what I really want? Is this how I feel compelled to act? Because then you feel so passionately, but that's the problem, it's a very emotional response a lot of times when this tea kettle boils.
Yep.
And then the emotion subsides and you start thinking logically and you're thinking, shit, I don't know what to do. And so some people go out and buy sports cars, people get divorced and sell a house and move and start a new career, so it's all this very, very hectic and very catastrophic stuff, but to a certain extent, it's also necessary, and because you don't realize that it's there until it boils over sometimes,
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly never too late to make that change, but it is going to be more difficult the later it is. The whole saying, the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm saying the same thing. Now, is the weight of a straw going to break a camel's back? No, but straw, day after day after day, straw after straw, and that weight adds up. Yeah. And eventually, we are only human. Yeah. And eventually, we break under that.
Every single decision you make that's counter to your truest self, that's a straw.
And it's going to stay there. It's going to stay in your, you know what I mean? Sit in your shoulders, stay in the back of your mind, affect how you interact and react to the people you love and the people you work with. Yeah. And it's tough because, like you said, you had worked this job for however long, and you were paying your bills in this way. You would learn to, maneuver, the world using this financially, and that as a, what do you call it? Like when people say, "Oh yeah, well, what do you do?" And you say, "Well, I'm this." You got that label to you. Now, when people, or right after that, when people ask what do you do, you're like, "I don't fucking know.
I'm unemployed."
I was hoping you tell me, what do you got for me? But you have to rearrange everything, because everything built on that foundation tends to crumble. Everything built on that foundation that is inauthentic tends to crumble, and it's painful, it's arduous, and it's difficult, certainly for self, but also for those that care about you. But how many times have you heard others, or have you been in a situation? I guess you just told us yours, but when rock bottom was the best thing that had ever happened to me, happened for me, because at back at that rock bottom, back at understanding why everything fell apart, you were forced to be honest with yourself. Yeah. And piece by piece, you had to rebuild that foundation, and then next level, rebuild whatever comes after that through that honesty with self. And from that, I mean, that's where the castles are made, and the castle as you see it, it could be just a real snazzy fucking hut, what I mean? But something of what you dream, what you feel, what you need in order to keep going and want to be better day after day. For self, that's how that starts. Absolutely. Originally.
Yeah. So something actually I was kind of talking to Rachel about this the other day, and she used a metaphor that, so we talked about it for a while, and I didn't quite wrap my mind around it, I think, in the way she meant it at the time, so I've been thinking about it a lot since, but so she was saying, so you're climbing this ladder, you're always climbing this ladder in life, right? So whatever, everybody says we climb the corporate ladder, but that applies to everything in life. That's our progress, we're constantly climbing up, right? So we talk a lot about foundation and rock bottom and bedrock and stuff. And what happens is, I think that every single, we're climbing this ladder. Now, if we get to a certain extent, and if things fall apart, a lot of people think that it's always, you have to go from where you're at on the ladder, you have to go all the way back down, and you have to restart, right? But the point she was making is that if you are climbing the ladder and you're sure-footed every single step that you make, right? So again, if you're being your truest self and you're doing yourself justice, every single step you make, right? Eventually, inevitably, you get to a certain point on the ladder and the ladder starts shaking and you get scared. Or maybe the ladder's gonna fall over if you move forward. So you're thinking, shit, I can't keep going, right? So your structure breaks, right? So that mirrors our metaphor, right? Now, if you're on a good ladder, you only have to go back 1 or 2 steps. Because that's your new starting point, right? You're 7 or 8 steps up. You don't have to go all the way back down to the bottom. You can just go back 2 or 3 steps. So, you know, for that rock bottom, right? Yes, if the first time you hit rock bottom, it's way, way, way down, right? But as you start building and as you start raising yourself up, you learn how to build a better foundation, right? So now, the next time you hit rock bottom, you're not on the bottom, you're on that last strong foundation that you built.
Right.
And then you build from there again. So every time you hit rock bottom, you're still, you know, it's a graph, but the graph doesn't go all the way up and then all the way back to 0, and all the way up and all the way back to 0. It goes all the way up and back to 10, and all the way up and back to 20. So over time, you still improve, you still get.
Yeah, because just because you are authentic doesn't mean you can't be wrong. Doesn't mean you're not gonna, you know, slip up.
Yes.
So it's being able to admit when you're wrong, being able to understand how you fucked up in the first place, and how you're gonna be better. I remember, and this is years ago, so whoever's watching, don't take the shit personally, but I had you know, I was with someone, and when I broke up with them, they deleted all of my music, and this is a while ago. But they deleted all my music thinking that would show me, or, you know, whatever the fuck they were thinking. But to me, it already existed, and it will always exist. And the music was less important than the time in which I put in, and the skill that I developed to get to the place that I was at then. And that was a while ago, and I feel the same exact way now. So for me, my foundation, my ground zero, which I was confident in, was solidified within me. And as like you were saying, whether it's a ladder or, you know, I just imagine this pyramid. You know, you build up a certain height, and if you do that from your truth and you do that from, you know, the love of self and what you're doing, that becomes solidified. And then you start to build again on top of that. And, you know, and eventually that becomes solidified. And so even if that crumbles, you're still up at this level, and you don't have to hit that rock bottom again.
Exactly.
I think that's so true. I think it's so true.
So yeah, everything can get bad, but it'll never be as bad as it was.
Right.
With that in mind, something I think is that you see this a lot in people that strength train, and they take some time off and they come back and they're not as strong as they used to be, or people that you know, train kickboxing or martial arts or whatever, or play music, whatever, any perishable skill that you obtain, if you don't continue to practice it, you lose it a little bit. And then when you come back, there's always this internal struggle of, man, I want to be as good as I used to be, right? Something that hit me one day when I was talking to one student about this, I just told him, I said, you'll never be as good as you used to be. You'll never be as good as you used to be. And they looked at me and were very confused, so I explained, you know what I mean, is that how we used to be doesn't exist anymore. And the only time it existed was for that brief fleeting moment. And yeah, maybe we were more technically proficient, maybe we were faster, maybe we were in better shape, whatever, but everything that we learned from that process of getting there, we have it now. So we can only ever be better than we were. We'll never be as good as we used to be. And it might not be in the same path, it might not be exactly, you know, if you measured it, it won't be the same metrics, right? But you'll be better because all that knowledge, right, all that practice you had writing music and stuff, right? That music will never be recreated as good as it was then. It'll be recreated better if we've built ourselves accordingly, you know? And I think that, you know, every time we relapse to that bottom, right? As long as we were putting in the work and trying to be better, right? We're always gonna have a place that was further along than it used to be. We'll always be better than we used to be. You might not feel like it, you might feel like we relapsed, but you can't put in the work every single day and not get better on whatever you're focusing on, you know? So then we go back to that last rung that we were saying, for that last place that we had a really strong, a real foundation. we start building again, and that's where, yeah, things are always going to feel a little bit shaky, and it's never going to be right the first time, and you're not going to be as sure of yourself as you need to. But if you're, again, as long as you're acting authentically and you're acting truly to yourself, even when everything breaks back down, even if you have to take a few steps back, right, it'll never be as bad as it was.
Right.
You know, it's always forward.
I tell myself every day, I'm in my prime. You know, I just tell I said, I'm in my prime, and every day I'm getting better. No matter what, you know, imagine getting caught up in the past, saying, "Oh, damn, let me chase that. Let me chase my idea of what that used to be." And then imagine if you can go there, and if you can sit yourself in that same position, sit next to you in whatever year that was. Imagine all the shit you were probably thinking, damn, I wish I had this, I wish I did this, I wish I, you know. So cutting that whole thing off right now, I'm in my prime.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm gonna be better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And whether that's just, those are just like, you know, talking points, you know, to get over, I don't know, but I don't care. I mean, that's just what works for me.
Yeah.
It allows me to keep moving forward. And like you said, you can't, as long as you are moving forward, you're gonna get better.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I, so kind of my version of that is, I'm as good as I could possibly be at this moment right now. I could not, there is no possible reality that could exist for me that I would be any better than I am right now in this moment.
Right.
And in the next moment, I'm gonna be even better than I was.
Right.
You know, so, but it's constant progress. And a little bit of it, you know, so it kind of sometimes might sound like motivational talk, right? Like this is just what you have to do to get through the day. And on shitty days, that's what it is, sure, you know. But it instills a sense of confidence in yourself too, and it instills a drive, an inherent, like deep down drive and push to keep moving forward.
Sure.
You know, as long as I keep moving, I'm going to go forward.
Yeah.
You know, there's no other way to go.
You know, and I think people gravitate to that. I know I can recognize when people are confident in themselves, they love what they do, and you can tell put in the work, and they speak genuinely. You know, I don't fucking, you know, talking points, things like that. People are reading a teleprompter on the screen, it doesn't keep my attention.
Right.
But if someone is speaking from their heart, whether I agree with it or not, that's my own problem.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But if they're telling their truth, I listen, because that's how I can learn.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's not always easy. You know, I think authenticity has a lot to do with courage.
Sure.
I think authenticity is very courageous, and I don't think anything new comes to be that does not stem from courage.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really interesting is, so there's a little bit of a dichotomy here, right? So we've been talking the whole time about how important it is to be authentic and be true to ourselves, right? And how much learning and how much progress can come from this, right? But when you look at the science of learning, part of learning something new actually lies in imitation. So think about how you learned to read and write. You didn't start making up your own words, right? You listened to what other people were saying and you started imitating them. When you learned to write, they gave you a sheet. These are all the letters. Draw these letters exactly as they look. And you would do your best, and you would imitate them, you would copy it. How long did we do that? Forever. Right? I add new words to my vocabulary all the time just from hearing the different ways people talk and understanding new stuff. And, you know, so you apply that to riding a bike. When you first start riding a bike, there's one way to do it. You know, you put on training wheels, or your parents hold it for you, you know, and you watch somebody else do it, and that's how you learn. That's how you learn to walk, right? You watch and you imitate, right? That's how you learn. That's how you learn martial arts, right? Is you watch. Okay, this is how we're going to throw this punch. This is our jab, and this is how we throw it. And then we bring it right back to our face. Well, why are we bringing it right back to our face? First day, it's because that's what I'm telling you to do. Your next day, okay, well, it's going to protect you if your hand's back to your face. Your next day, okay, well, we can actually be more efficient with our punches if they're being fired from here. And the next day, it's, okay, well, I saw somebody, so-and-so in the pros, they're throwing with their hand down here. Why are they doing that? Well, because they're better than us. Right? Okay, well, what? It's the same punch, right? It should follow the same rules. You don't understand that. So, and I'm saying, Dave, this is weeks and months and years of training and stuff. And then you start to understand, okay, well, what becomes the artistic portion of it is this is their personal expression of this movement. We all learn the jab, boom, right here, hand up, snapping our shoulders, bringing it right back to our face, right? But then you see these highly developed people, these artists that are expressing it differently, but it's a true understanding, right? So they started the same way. They started imitating, and some people are just naturally freak athletes, and they're gonna do things their own way the whole time because they're just naturally gifted, right? But for the most part, it follows this pattern of imitation. It follows this pattern of tribalism. I'm gonna go hang out with other people that box, because I'm a boxer now. I belong to a group of boxers. We're boxers, we're fighters. This is what we do, you know? And eventually, one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes, and you hear it quoted a few different ways and written a few different ways, but essentially it's absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is essentially your own. So like you were talking about listening to somebody who is authentic, but essentially is different from you, right? It's important to listen to them because we have to absorb what's useful. How do we know truly what's useful until we've imitated it? Until we've tried to wrap our mind around it, until we've put ourselves in their shoes, until we've empathized, until we've walked down that path, right? How do you know what's useful about how I'm going to teach you to throw a jab until you've thrown it? Sometimes 10,000 fucking times before you think, okay, well, this doesn't work for me. You know, if I work one-on-one with a student, any given student, I'm going to have a different way that I speak to them than any other student, right? Because certain things work for them and certain things don't, right? I'm going to try to teach them all the same thing. And they're going to imitate me as closely as they can. I said, look, until you understand it, do it like I do it. And then once you understand it, take what works that I told you, get rid of what doesn't work for you, and then add your own expression to it. And we see this all the time. You hear, you and I have different ways of speaking. We have different slang that we gravitate towards. We have different handwriting styles, right? We have different ways of combining words. You know, especially you rapping, right? You gravitated towards this different thing. But how many times, especially as you were learning, how many times did you just sit there and listen to a song and rap along with it?
Sure.
You know, that's how I learned to play bass.
Sure.
Is I'd find that somebody else had written the music down. Somebody else had written the music originally, and I would play it exactly as it was written.
Yeah. You know, for me as an artist, words aren't new. Right. I didn't come up with these words, and I could follow someone. Gravitate to someone because I like how they use words to describe their life, or the flow that they use with these words to describe their experience. But at a certain point, your words cannot define my experience, and I have to put those words in that order in which properly define my experience. And I think words I can always learn new, but what I've started to, as I progressed as an artist or a musician, what I understood is the timing in which I use the words. So like I could use the same words, but the more work I put into this craft, the timing opened up for me. So now I could weave myself in and out, and I could say the same thing, same words, but I could change the flow up. And so it's those little things once you put the work in, because you need all these building blocks to understand the animal that you're trying to capture, you know what I mean, or the craft that you're trying to perfect. But at a certain point in time, once you master it, and I'm not saying that I mastered it, but we are working toward mastery. Once you master it, it's a more intuitive understanding or meticulous understanding of every aspect that goes into it. So for the artist, it's the ear. It's how you hear it. What that beat says to me, how it moves me, what memories it brings up, what ambitions it brings up, the way that I want to come across, the words I choose to say it, and the flow in which I put those words into. That all encompasses the art. Because at first I was just saying da 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 da. Now I can say da 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 da. You know what I mean? Yeah. And move with that, and that comes with the work, but the authentic work. So that's a very good point.
Something that just struck me, man, and I've been thinking a lot about this lately the past couple of weeks. But mastery. I use the word mastery. I think that mastery is simply the commitment
commitment to learn.
right? And
Because it's never over.
exactly. So, and this is huge for me. I'm just going to explore this real quick, kind of freestyle a little bit away from the topic. But a couple weeks ago, after one of my Muay Thai classes, I asked my students who you hear a lot of people reference Bruce Lee and essentially said it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. And I asked my students, I was like, well, let's examine the jab, right? So obviously this has been, I was talking about this earlier, but this has been on my mind a lot, but just throwing a jab. What does a perfect jab look like? And none of my students get in there, I don't know. Because you would look at high-level guys and you see 10 different ways to throw this punch. A very simple punch, right? It's just straight out and straight back, right? So what does the perfect jab look like? I don't know. Okay, well, everybody talks about this pursuit of perfection, mastery, right? And so you take 10,000 hours, you learn to throw this jab. You throw your jab for 10,000 hours, or 10,000 reps, right? It's just long time. Now, every single time you throw it, you're trying to get better at it. And eventually you get to a point, say I've thrown the jab 3,000 times and something clicks with me. I'm like, shit, this is a better way. This is closer to mastery if I do it like this. Then I got to start my reps over. Right? So then I do 3,000 more and then another light bulb goes off and I got to start my reps over. But at a certain point, you quit counting. At a certain point, you've actually mastered the punch because you make a commitment to yourself that you will continue to work on this and learn it.
Right.
And that, you say, okay, now I understand where I'm trying to go. I understand that I'll never get to that perfection, but I understand that I want to chase it. And I think that's all that mastery is an agreement with yourself and the universe and the art that you want to pursue this forever.
Yeah.
And once you do that, once you understand that this is never going to be done, and you fall in love with it, a lot of that authenticity and that realism, that personal expression starts to come out.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you have to just go through and do your katas, your form. You see the martial traditional guys with their forms and everything. And they learn it in a very specific way. Because you have to learn it that way until you get to that point of mastery. And once you've mastered it that way, then it's exploration.
Yeah.
Then it's restarting and the growth really begins.
Right. Because then you learn to love the process.
Yeah, man.
I've got this song called Timeless, and I said, as far as success goes, I'm never there, but always closer.
Yeah.
Continue, because it's not about necessarily, it was my understanding at the time that it was not about the destination. It was about, what it took mentally for me to keep trudging each step after step, and the people I met and the experience that I had along the way. And that was important for me to learn, because, the goals will come and go. And goals are important because it helps you take those steps. But I'm reading a book right now, and there's an individual, there's a shopkeep, and he's talking to this kid, and this kid is chasing after his dreams. And the shopkeep likes to shop just the way it is. The kid's trying to add on to his shop and expand it so he gets more money. He's like, no. He's like, I don't like change. He's like, I started the shop because I wanted to make enough money to go and chase my dream, go see, accomplish his goal, his dream, ultimately. He's like, you think I like doing what I do? I don't. It's arduous. I eat the same breakfast and lunch every day. I sell to the same people every day. And he's like, well, why don't you want to expand and grow? That way you can get your money and go get your dream. And he says, I don't want to reach my goal because I don't want to come back to the shop because I'll have no motivation to do it anymore. You know what I mean? So and that's and I don't know if it has so much to do with his goal, the idea of his goal not matching up with what he really feels and wants, but the thought of that, kind of fucked me up, because I'm like, sometimes, I think we talked about this before, success itself, to reach a goal, to reach success, now you don't know where to go from there. Where do you go? Now you have to start all over? That shit it can be terrifying. So I understood where he was coming from, but to read it out loud, I'm like, that shit is asinine. Yeah. I'm like, you gotta get your shit, you gotta go. And then I'm like, oh damn, I'm yelling at myself.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, what's awesome about that is something we talked about too, is that the goals become a byproduct of the process.
Right.
And it's it's very, very important to have goals, and we need to have goals. But once you get to that point of mastery, and once you get to that point of I just want to be a student forever, and I want to work forever, and I want to learn forever, and I want to grow forever, the goals all of a sudden become, okay, well, along my path, I think this is something I can accomplish. And you hit that, but once you get there, what's so beautiful about that is that you know where to go next. I mean, you might not have the perfect picture, but you know what's your next step after you hit your goal. It's forward. It's keep getting better. It's keep growing. And then all of a sudden you find that you're hitting goals that you didn't even know were goals.
Right.
Actually, I saw our friend JP just tuned in, and he just reached out to me again about speaking at his anti-violence event. They're going to do another one in September.
Right.
So I found myself in a great position that when he asked me to do it the first time, I got to do it, and now this time I'm super, super excited about it. I feel like I'll know, I'm already preparing myself for it. I already, kind of have some things I want to talk about and stuff. But that wasn't even a goal I knew I had until he got in touch with me and said, I want you to do this. And I said, yeah, you're right. I want to do that. And it was, but it's that, it's exactly, it's what we're doing here. And it's this authentic exploration of self, and this genuine desire to be better every single step that I take. And then all of a sudden, goals are coming to me. And yes, I have specific goals that I want to hit as I'm going, and my path eventually will lead me to them. But it's not. I don't have my blinders on. Because I don't have my blinders on now, these other things that I didn't know were happening can happen.
Yeah, I mean, even in this conversation, we jumped way off topic a couple times.
Way off topic.
And had we stayed on topic, that wouldn't have been authentic to us.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was joking around before we started. I was like, yeah, we should just script this whole thing out.
Right. But that's the beauty of it. And, and it is, it is daunting at first before you take that first step. Before you take that first step toward authenticity. It's, back to the term courageous. It's a courageous thing to do. It's a difficult thing to do. It's a vulnerable thing to do. I had come across a solid quote just when I was researching some shit, and by Ambrose Redmond, and they said that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than the fear itself. Yeah. I thought that was huge. It's a great way of thinking about it. And there's nothing more important than that self-love. You know what I mean? And that self-discovery and that internal balance. And or peace of mind. Because I think everything that stems from an individual who is balanced is, I think the potential for growth is unlimited. And again, just to wrap it back up, I think that right there is the importance of authenticity.
I think honestly one of the most courageous and honest ways that you can love yourself and take care of yourself is to challenge yourself. Is to be authentic, is to hold yourself accountable, is to tell yourself you're being a liar, is to tell yourself that you haven't built this on your truth. And it's sometimes that's a very painful process, because sometimes it's beneficial to a certain point, and then all of a sudden you start questioning and nitpicking every single little thing you do, and then you have to find a balance with it. And it's a lot of back and forth, and it's a lot of personally induced turmoil and stuff. But and that's a big thing now. It's a huge thing. Everybody talks about self-care and self-love and all this, and I don't think that we take the time to really understand exactly what that is. And sometimes self-love is challenging yourself and is forcing yourself to be uncomfortable, forcing yourself to be vulnerable, and understanding the courage that is extracted from it. And Brene Brown is someone we used to talk about a lot when we first started, but she talks so much about vulnerability and courage and stuff, and she's going to say it much more meaningfully than I think I can. So if you guys get a chance, check her out too if you want to dive very specifically into vulnerability and courage.
Right. Because self-love is more than just throwing nice words at it. You know what I mean? And covering it with these niceties. I mean, I was having a conversation a couple weekends ago out in Ithaca, and they were talking about positive toxicity. Which was interesting to me, because I'm like, oh, if it's positive, how could it be a bad thing? But they were saying that the use of these just positive phrases on a whim. These shallow, hollow, positive phrases do nothing. They keep you in your place. It's like junk food for the mind and the body.
Yeah, too much of a good thing.
Too much of a good thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, we're getting off topic.
Yeah. Hey man, authentically, that's our truth. That's where it's taken.
Absolutely. But
Awesome, man.
yeah, I gotta wrap it up. I got a meeting coming up in about like an hour or so.
Good. I offensively don't want to talk to you.
Yeah. Well, this is great.
Awesome.
I appreciate you guys tuning in. Shout out to JP. I think that's might be him in the bottom.
Yep.
Did they figure the show's out in Sharky's in Syracuse, right?
Sharky's in Syracuse. Yeah, the date he told me was September 12th. So I know that's a hard-working motherfucker right there.
Yeah, like
I know they're putting in a ton of work. It's gonna be social distancing and all that stuff. He's getting a bunch of bands together. He got a bunch of metal bands, but he's looking specifically for hip hop and country, and just like very diverse genres and stuff. He does such a beautiful job of orchestrating the community together and stuff. And as it goes, I'll be sharing a lot more of it through my personal page. I'm sure you'll be throwing some shares and stuff like that on social
Absolutely.
media.
And he's just an authentic dude. He really is. Ever since I met him, he'll tell you exactly like it is, and it's needed. And he's really about the community. He and Michelle. So every Wednesday we have a volunteer night out at the hospice up on Gotham, and we go and maintain the garden up there. He and Michelle drive all the way out from Henderson. And they come and they join us, and the conversation is great, and his heart's always in the right place, and he's just good at what he does. So much appreciation to him and his wife for being, the most authentic selves.
Always, man. Yeah. And everybody that tuned in, saw a couple of you guys jumped into the live feed. Always appreciate that. And anybody who's going back and watching this on YouTube, thank you guys so much for tuning in and giving us a platform to have these awesome discussions.
For sure.
Quince, thank you for your time, man.
Absolutely, man.
Talk to you guys soon.
Peace.